Early edition of the Cybersecurity Hot Seat today. I'm with a very good colleague, good friend of mine in the industry, Jason Brown. And we're going to do a two-part installment, the next episodes of how people have reinvented themselves and brought themselves into the industry of cybersecurity. We're seeing a paradigm shift right now where colleges and universities are making these courses and certificates and degrees available to people. But for people that are a little longer in the tooth, like Jason and I, we've kind of had to reinvent ourselves and bring ourselves into cybersecurity and bring these skills into there. And Jason is definitely one of those guys. We're very lucky to have him for this conversation. So before we start, Jason, welcome. Jason is security manager at the Shyft Group in the Michigan area, and we're again very lucky to have you here. Thank you, Jason, for joining.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. So before we get into your path into cyber, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? What you did prior to cyber, and again, we'll go into a little bit deeper. What the path was that got you there, but just a little high level overview, maybe a little personal fact of you, and just get the audience familiar with the man that you are.
Yeah. I'm born and raised in Michigan, been here my entire life, lived in a number of different places, married with a wife and one child. Cybersecurity and computing has always been a passion of mine for ever since I was in middle school. I mean, it was something that, we got the Apple IIs and I just went to town and went playing with them, right? Boy, that dates me quite a bit. No, man, it's been good. It's really been good. Yeah, I am a technologist at heart, and really been enjoying the cybersecurity field.
That's awesome. Now, it's interesting that you talk about your path to in technology and middle school and those Apple IIs. And I remember that time. I remember when the internet, quote unquote, first came out, and the internet being AOL, and like it opened up this whole new world for my friends and I. It was crazy, and we will not share some of the stories because I don't feel like I don't look good in orange. So we'll just leave it at that. But it's interesting that technology has brought people to cybersecurity, but it's not necessarily a one-to-one. Technology is a piece of cybersecurity, but there's so many other nuances, so many other aspects to cybersecurity. So interested to know how technology kind of introduced you into security itself, and if you could just talk a little bit about the path that it took you to get to where you are today, which is very successful in the industry.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you say that because I remember back in middle and high school using AOL for our internet connection, but really was into IRC quite a bit.
Okay.
In fact, I knew a guy named Bob who would go through and download a bunch of not so free software. And I actually had my computer hacked a couple of times from downloading. I mean, from Bob downloading this software. But that really got me to get interested more into technology. I've been a big Unix, Linux, open source person, goodness, since I can remember. Doing a lot of programming, a lot of scripting. Even when I was in college, my background, I wanted to get into computers when I got into college, but I wasn't sure what kind of aspect or what type of field I wanted to get into. So I started off at Eastern Michigan with their IT program because computer science, it interested me, but back then, putting a semicolon in the wrong place meant your entire program didn't work, and
Mm,
I just didn't have the patience for that. So, I started off at Eastern going into IT, transferred a couple of times, met my wife as I was transferring, going to different schools, and ended up graduating from Central Michigan with a degree that I had originally started off with, which was IT. Um, and back in the late 90s, early 2000s, there wasn't a computer science or a computer security focus in
mm,
IT and computer programming. You kind of morphed into cybersecurity, what the idea of it was back then, and it wasn't what we think it is today. I
mm,
mean, back then it was usernames, passwords, and protecting ourselves from external threats. But we didn't worry about a lot of external threats, internal threats, DDoS attacks, those types of things. So it's really morphed a lot over the last couple of decades.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, can you share with the group the first job or first position you held from a cybersecurity perspective and kind of how that felt?
Yeah, actually, it was my first networking job. I mean, when I was at CMU, I worked for the network engineering group and was there installing switches, routers, got a little bit of exposure with network access control, and things like that. But when I got my first real job, it was at Ferris State, and it was in networking. You know, and networking had a plethora of different things that you could get exposed to. Not just from firewalls, but from web application firewalls, load balancers, wireless technology, and a lot of identity and access management as far as ensuring that the people who were connecting to your network, you knew who they were. I remember working on a project, putting in new wireless for a satellite campus, and they wanted free open Wi-Fi, and I'm like, no, no, we have to authenticate our users. I mean, this was in downtown Grand Rapids. I can't imagine somebody walking by and picking up free Wi-Fi and downloading, malicious content. And I wasn't gonna go to jail for that, right? So I,
Yes,
I wanted to
yes.
make sure that, we had adequate protections in place.
Mm,
But from there, I didn't really get a quote unquote my first real cybersecurity job until I went to the state of Michigan. I had a couple of jobs between Ferris and the SOM, but it was um, it was a jack of all trades type
mhm,
of work.
mhm,
And I had again a lot of networking, a lot of network security background, and that's what I got hired in to do when I got to the state. Um, I was a network security engineer, which then morphed into an enterprise security architect. So from there, I mean, you got exposed to just pretty much everything. I mean, you had to
mhm,
know protocols, you had to know application stacks, you
mhm.
had to know networking. I mean, it was like drinking from a fire hose every
Yeah,
single day.
yeah.
And not that, drinking from a fire hose hasn't stopped, because it's only kept going.
Mhm,
But, that's the interesting thing about cybersecurity, is that it's never dull, it's never boring, it's always changing. And for a person like me, I have to have that quick, squirrel moment where, the bright shiny thing grabs my attention and goes
mhm.
right after it. So,
Yeah, it's interesting because we're around the same age, and when I got into cybersecurity, that jack of all trades thing, um, it was either boom or bust for people. Either people embraced it like you did, you had to have that consummation constant learning, constant, movement, and it really sunk some people. Like I think that really weeded out, okay, who's good for cybersecurity and who it's just not a fit for, because it was that, we very rarely did you hear CISO, very rarely did you hear cybersecurity community back in the mid to late 2000s, and it was one person that was just doing policy and procedures, security awareness training, plugging in firewalls. Like it was crazy, back then we didn't have the concentrated focus on building out teams. So yeah, that's really interesting, to hear that's how it started. So it's a great segue into my next question, because we hear about cybersecurity, we hear about zero unemployment, we hear about the salaries that security people are commanding these days. I think from the outside looking in, people people like, wow, it's great, it's easy, let me get my security plus and I'm going to be making $300,000 tomorrow. It's just not that. Or it's always exciting, and I'm going to have a whole company that's just rallying behind me, and they're going to give me unlimited budget and unlimited support to promote the cybersecurity program in our organization. Now we know that's definitely not true. So,
Right.
give me maybe one or two of the challenges that you faced as your career morphed. Again, you've held some really great positions and some unique verticals. So the state of Michigan, that's interesting. You had some exposure in education. What are some of the challenges that you faced as in your path as you continue to morph your career?
Education. I think that's the biggest thing. And the reason why I say that is because I feel like I'm continually educating the stakeholders, I'm continually educating the business
Mm,
side
mm,
of what cybersecurity is, what it means, and the regulations that go alongside that.
mm,
Um, you know, when I was at the SOM, it was just one other architect and myself, and we had to know all the federal regulations, all the state regulations, third party regulations. We had to know them in and out and help the agencies in the business side architect their applications correctly to meet those requirements. And I really think that we're doing a good job on education, but we have a hard time. And I don't want to say dumbing down because that's a terrible term, but picking up on the business speak of cyber. Recently with Log4j and even some of the other big ones like Poodle and oh goodness, what was the other one? Heartbleed.
mhm,
Trying to educate them as far as where our systems are, what's installed on them, why legacy systems are bad for business and cyber hygiene, and being able to coerce is even a worse term, but it's a matter of partnering with the business, partnering with the stakeholders. I think, the other big aspect of it is developing relationships, the networking in cybersecurity. I see a lot of kids coming out that, they've got a lot of technical speak, but they don't have the business speak to kind of back that up.
mm,
And when you start getting up in those higher tiers, you have to learn how to communicate with the business and have them understand what it means for a vulnerability like Log4j and how that can really cripple a network or a business, and why it's important to fix those issues.
mm,
Um, and the other thing too, even when I go back and I think about the recent press release about the Uber CISO, getting sent to jail for what, 8, 9 years, something like that.
mm,
Um, I feel for a lot of people that are higher up in the tiers that, they think they're doing a good job, but maybe they just got a bad rap, or they something they were pressured into doing something that they weren't wanting to do, or it
mhm,
was to save face and try to keep their job, you know.
mm.
Um, but no, I think those are some of the biggest issues that we're facing in cyber.
Yeah, so two words that you brought up there that I wanted to focus in on, that were so key, and I really want the people that are listening to this to understand, because I think you hit the nail on the head on that. One is the partnership. Um, you know, we're still in this weird, and I thought for sure it would change. We're still in this weird company organizational like culture of like the security guy is the end all be all, and he has to figure everything out. But you, like you said, it is a business issue. So there's the stakeholders, the board, the executive team, committees. They have to be in lockstep with you and partnering with you and supporting you and others that are in the position, with that. And then the word education. I think that's a big thing. And the cybersecurity world still does a poor job of educating the masses, in my opinion, at least. And because you have two ends of the spectrum. You have one end that's fear, uncertainty, and doubt. That's kind of vendor driven, unfortunately. Like, if you don't plug this in, you're gonna die. If you don't implement this program, you're gonna die. Like, alarmist, ambulance chasing, the whole thing. But then you have the other
Mhm.
side of it, of where it's like, well, it's never going to happen to me. It doesn't exist. Like, we'll be fine. Let's just get a cybersecurity insurance policy and all our troubles go away. And really, I think where there's a huge gap, um, and a huge opportunity for people that are looking to get in, is to take the data and to normalize it and to put it into everyday terms of it. I was at a conference this week, and I was talking to someone high up in security, and he was just like, yeah, I can't get the board to understand, and they don't think it's serious, and they're like, just take care of it. And I was like, one time I heard somebody say, they went into the board and like, okay, what is our mean time to being down? Like, how long can we afford to be down? What's the time frame of that? And they're all like, zero. I was like, well, understand that if we undercome a cybersecurity attack, it's not going to be zero. Put a couple of zeros in front of that and add a nine, and that's probably going to be the amount of hours that we're going to be working on this. And when you can break it down from that perspective, it's a good thing. Which, again, great job leading into the next question that I have for you. And we've been talking for a few years now, and you have really good communications, because I think that's, I'm gonna take some of the words out of your mouth, and identify that as something that you're good at, and that's very important, is communication skills, and kind of alluded to
Yeah,
that
thank you.
in the question. Yeah, no, it's so huge. um but what are some of the other soft skills, if you have any? We could leave it at communication, because I mean, I think that's number one. But any other soft skills that you think people need or can bring to the table? Maybe they're again transitioning into this career, but some intangibles they can bring to cybersecurity that's going to make them successful.
Yeah, I mean, soft skills, obviously communication, like you said, is huge. But empathy.
Mm,
Empathy is something that's missing in our communication style. Um, in case in point, I mean, let's say, you're in finance, you're working, and all of a sudden you got an infection on your laptop, and your whole day is shot because cybersecurity is come in, they've taken your laptop, they've confiscated it. Um, but it's one of those things where, we got to come in and not just apologize for what had happened, but empathize for the missed work that finance person is going to go through. I mean, they've lost a day. It's shot. If it's month end or year end, I mean,
Mm,
it means late nights, long weekends to pick up where they left off.
mm,
And we've got to be able to bring ourselves down to that level of understanding that, while this impacted security, this impacted IT, and it's like, oh great, there's another dumb user that clicked on something that wasn't supposed to. Things happen, and we have to remember that and realize that things happen, and we have to empathize and be with them while they're going through this I don't want to say terrible time, but it's definitely mixing up or messing up their day.
mhm,
And we've got to be able to do that. You know, funny thing is, I kind of feel like I need to go back to school and get a psychology degree, because you deal with people's problems day in and
mhm,
day out.
mhm,
And you've got to be able to have that communication style to make sure that they know that everything's okay, that they didn't mess up, that we'll
mhm,
get everything fixed, and we'll put you back to where you need to be. But
mhm,
again, like you said, the whole mentality of this is never going to happen to me, it's going to happen to you.
mhm,
And you just have to take that in when you go into your day. When 8 a.m. rolls around and you're walking into your job, you just have to realize that, okay, today things may hit the fan, and that's okay.
mhm.
You just have to work the problem and keep going.
Yeah, and to kind of reverse that, the empathy piece is huge, and it's something that our team here is very focused in on when we're talking about solutions or services that we provide. Because when you're in this game long enough, you actually see, one of the phrases that I've always had is that the physical world is impacted by the virtual. So I have seen people crying, at the proverbial table because of all the money that has been lost for the organization, and the potential of the company shutting down. I've seen cots set up in data centers, for network engineers that could not leave. It was either you stay or we fold. And and again, kind of taking it from our side, when we're providing solutions and services, you have to think of it in that way. It's not just, it's not like I'm selling HP servers or Citrix licenses or things like that. This is real stuff that is life impacting, because if you don't get paid, there was that one incident last Christmas time with the payroll company, and people weren't getting checks during Christmas, so when you're talking about these things, like, hey, let's not talk zeros and ones. Let's talk about, hey, what impact would it be to your family if you didn't receive a check, for the month of December? What
Right.
happens? And that's real, and that's where the empathy comes in. So awesome, awesome, awesome answer. So great, great stuff. So the last question I have here is really the hope of this conversation is that people who are thinking about transitioning watch this and kind of get the confidence to take that first step, with that. So maybe a brief word of encouragement or support of, what would you tell the younger Jason Brown, or your child, or whatever, to say, hey, here are some things that you need to consider moving in, and encouragement, say, hey, you can do it, you can make it happen.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, you can definitely make it happen. You have to get yourself in the right situation. You have to immerse yourself into the field and never stop learning. That's probably my key advice, is to never stop learning.
Awesome, great. This was fantastic, man. This was great. I want to thank you so much for taking time, and the people that watch this are definitely going to be better off whether they've been in the space for a while or not. I think we've covered a lot of topics here that are very tangible, very insightful across the board. So thank you for this expertise, just
Yeah,
fantastic, and
you're very welcome.
greatly appreciate it. So thank you everybody for joining, and we will see you the next episode of Cybersecurity Hot Seat.